How many more days can we go with our Next Fest 2023 coverage? This may be day number 7 of our showcase, but I still have plenty more indie games to go over. So with that said, let's get to the latest crop of games. We are starting things off with Choo Survivor. This is a game that combines all the latest trends of VS-like, trains, and zombies. We are, as the name suggests, on a train, trying to get from point A to point B with all those nasty zombies getting in the way. As you maneuver your train, or I should say accelerate across, you'll pick up money that can use to upgrade as well as unlock different weapons, as well as have to gather fuel in order to keep your train running. There's also survivors you can save to add to your damage power or your total damage, but the main thing is just trying to get to the end of the track. Now, from what we played of the demo for this one, it did feel a little bit basic, like a lot of the VS-likes we've seen. There is a number of unlocks, new trains, permanent upgrades, and so on. I'm curious if there's going to be any more in terms of different scenarios, different enemies, that kind of thing. It basically got to the point where I was just holding down accelerate and not stopping for anything, and there was nothing the game could have done to stop me. I do like the concept here of kind of like an auto-moving VS-like or bullet heaven, and if you are, once again, not completely tired of the formula, and you're looking for one that gives you at least a very straightforward line, I guess no pun intended, then this could be one worth checking out. We now turn to Reverie. This is a puzzle platformer where we are exploring our dreams with the power to kind of phase in and out of the background, as well as take objects along for the ride. The puzzle solving this time is going to be about where you set up objects so that they can kind of interfere or interact with the environment that's already there. You can move around both in and outside of the background, or I guess that would be considered a foreground. And the challenge in this one is definitely going to be setting things up. This is kind of one of those you need to think like 2 or 3 steps ahead style of game. Now, for what we played of the demo, I don't know there's going to be like hidden collectibles or things like that, but there did show off some of the more advanced challenges, and it does look like this game is going to get very trippy in terms of puzzle logic. So, this is one of those games that, again, you'll know very quickly if you are the right audience for it. If you like puzzle platforming and, messing with your own perception of things, then I would suggest checking out Reverie. And now for something a little bit more actiony, and that is Spell Disc. This is an action roguelike that the general basics of this game should be familiar to everyone who's played something like a Hades or any kind of dodge-centric action roguelike. But what the game does very differently is that it gives you not only control over what weapons you get, but how you power them up. How this works is that you have different spells. They come in different types, they have different costs, elemental, stuff like that. Whatever spell you attach to your wand is going to be constantly charging, but you'll soon get access to spell discs. These spell discs are going to be randomly chosen from set types, and each one will basically power up something with a conditional. So the conditional could be every time you dash, generate 10 mana. Every time an enemy dies. Every time you do fire damage, take a hit. Anything like that. And then whatever spell you attach to said disc will then be powered by that. And the footage that you're going to be seeing here, I have the spell disc that generates mana on cold. So I use a cold spell to generate mana. When the mana hits max, it will cast another spell. And then I have another spell that triggers anytime or will generate mana when an enemy dies. So one spell essentially will lead to powering a second one, which leads to powering a third one, and then all of a sudden it just becomes pandemonium for the enemies in terms of everything firing off at once. It's a very ingenious idea and concept for an action roguelike, letting the player kind of build not only their own play style, but also mix and match things to create like this symphony of elemental blasts all over the screen. If I had any problems from the demo, much like another game we played earlier in Next Fest, Boomerang Jack, the game can get a little heavy in terms of effects on screen, and it's very easy to kind of lose your character or lose sense as to what is going on. The later areas and some of the boss fights will spawn lots of enemies, lots of projectiles, lots of things you need to keep track of, on top of making sure that your spells are firing off and you have the right discs on. You can also upgrade spell discs and spells to make them more potent, and there's going to be unlockables as well. So all in all, I really enjoy this one. And if you're looking for an action roguelike with a very different take that rewards that kind of advanced planning and setup that we all know and love, definitely check out Spell Disc. And now we turn to another of my favorite games that I've played, and this is Cataclismo. This is a kind of 3D real-time strategy game that combines elements of Stronghold and They Are Billions. And with that descriptor, I think I probably got a few of you salivating right there if you are fans. Our concept here is that it is the post-apocalypse. A strange mist has covered the world, corrupting and destroying all life. It is up to the remaining human survivors in order to try and fight back and reclaim the world. So the game itself, as I said, combines very much the They Are Billions model with that of Stronghold. How that works is that you'll build your settlement by constructing various homes, various resource generators, and they will pump out resource every minute. You'll need this as there is a day-night timer, and at nightfall you will be attacked by waves of enemies. The Stronghold aspect comes in with how you build defenses. The game features a very modular system where you can set up stairs, different levels of kind of walls, platforms, and so on. And where it gets very ingenious is that any wall that is kind of 3 blocks higher or more is considered heavily protected or armored, so it protects more of, or it takes more damage before it will go down. You can build things smaller if you like, and there is an actual reason for doing this. The different characters in the game have different intended kind of height ranges for their attacks. So archers prefer to be at 5 blocks or 5 meters above the ground or more, while lobbers prefer to be 4 meters or less. And if you match the height to the character, they will do more damage or their attacks will gain different properties. There's also things you can build for your castle or for your defenses that will enhance characters, such as the banners that you see on the screen, those kinds of like stone things like at the edge of the wall, and so on. And it's a very brilliant idea of merging the kind of creative customization and building of defenses of Stronghold with that of holding out against hordes of They Are Billions. And I am sure there are people far more craftier than I am who will come up with some just like army of darkness insane defensive strategies in order to hold out against the enemy. As the game goes on, you'll be introduced to more military. You will have to budget kind of the resource spend as well as how much oxygen you have, with of course having units out on the field and building defenses. So you do need to be mindful that any potential hole in your settlement, that's where these enemies are going to come pumping through and causing you trouble. Now, from what I play in the demo, it does feel a little bit more generous than They Are Billions. This is not going to be one of those games where, oh no, you left one block open, one enemy got through, now your entire base is dead. But this is a game that's going to reward clever planning and understanding how to set up your buildings and set up your defenses just right. If I had anything to nitpick with this game, is that the act of building your various walls, gates, and so on, it does feel a little cumbersome at the moment. It is definitely one of those games where it's better to kind of build things one block, one tile at a time, and it may be nice to maybe have like some stock templates if players want them, just to quickly get a gate up, or quickly get like a small wall going. But even with that said, Cataclismo is definitely high on my list. Just a brilliant combination of mechanics and systems, and I cannot wait to build like Fort Josh at some point in this game. We now turn to Lovux. This is a minimalist puzzle game where your mission is to shatter all the glass in each level. As the game goes on, different mechanics are introduced that affect the properties of the glass, such as a shield that basically lets you do 2 hits before that piece of glass gets destroyed. This is one of those games, again, like some of the other ones we've talked about, where you will know fairly quickly if this is a game that's going to be right for you or not. I found the general moving of the glass between like the different nodes, as you see, a little bit cumbersome. It feels like it's kind of meant for like a mobile drag and touch interface, and the mouse didn't quite move it as fast as I would have liked. But I did like the concept of this one. This is a game that was submitted on the Game Wisdom Discord by the developer, and it looks like this could be another winner for puzzle fans. I do hope that they at least add maybe like a little bit more of a background to the game, as right now, as you can see, it is very, very minimalistic. But if you are a puzzle fan looking another one to check out, then this could be one worth looking into. We now have The Devil Within Satgat. This is a 2D action-adventure game where I'm not quite sure what the setting is. At one point we're fighting demons in a kind of fantasy, and then we're in post-apocalyptic cyber future. But demons have invaded the planet, and when our best friend literally stabs us in the back, we are now corrupted. And the only way to cure our disease and stop us from becoming a demon is, well, you guessed it, kill lots and lots of demons. So the main thing that kind of got me interested in The Devil Within is the multitudes of progression and the combat system. You have the ability to dodge, block, parry. You get different abilities. There are trees within skill trees in this game. And the combat itself is quite interesting. They're kind of going for like a higher than usual we see from a skill curve. How this works is that you have counterpoints, or CP. This drives your heavy attack as well as some of your special moves. You can only use CP, or you can only dodge, if you have enough of those points. But your normal attacks do not hit stun enemies, only special and heavy moves. So you really do need to weigh how aggressive you are to keep the enemy stunned versus your ability to get away or perform additional actions. There will be additional unlocks. In the demo we got a gun, so you can fight demons with the magical power of a giant, I guess, assault rifle or sniper. And the game looks to have some decent variety in terms of set pieces and so on. With that said, some of the finer points of combat felt a little iffy to me. Enemies have very fast kind of attack animations, and it can be tricky to figure out the exact time you need for perfect parrying or perfect blocking. And that is important because several of your specials are tied to basically a counter after you get a perfect parry or perfect dodge. When I fought the kind of boss of the demo, it was very hard. I wasn't even sure if I could like parry his moves because the hitbox is so big, and it was one of those cases where the hitbox of the enemy extended beyond the model of it. So if you try to go by where the enemy's attack model is, you're already going to get hit by the attack. So if they can kind of fine-tune the advanced play of the combat, The Devil Within Satgat could be a very interesting action-adventure game for fans looking for some hacking and slashing upon the highest order. We now have Magin, the Rat Project Stories. This is kind of like a visual novel meets deck building style game. The combo aesthetic I think is interesting. It didn't quite work for me, but it certainly stands out. From the gameplay, you're going to be mixing the kind of explore and decide various choices kind of aspect of a visual novel, but combat is handled much like a deck builder RPG or deck builder roguelike. The twist of this is you have kind of like a morality or like a, I guess like what powers you choose kind of mentality at the top of the screen. That is the purple and kind of like goldish bar. When you make certain choices from your character, those will affect kind of that meter. As you go further down one of those lines, kind of like light side, dark side elements, you'll gain access to different cards. Some of the cards are powered by those emotional powers, and they have kind of like a almost like flip side version if you don't have enough meter for it. While the game certainly looks striking, the card-based combat is I think lacking in a few aspects. For starters, the game throws a lot of like symbols and things around in terms of stats and so on, but it doesn't do a good job of conveying what all that actually does and how it affects the impact of a card. I would have liked to see, I think, a little bit more animation as well during combat. Everything just kind of has like very like stock motions and like, some generic swings. So this is a game that I feel like it's going to be aimed more for like the visual novel or adventure side first, and deck builders maybe second or third. So if you're looking for a very interesting game, and one that of course is going to combine our dark fantasy and brooding hero with the likes of cards and combat, then this one may be worth checking out. And now up is Cusineer. This is a roguelite slash cooking management sim kind of game. When our parents decide to take a trip around the world, it leaves Palm here as going to become the replacement chef, dungeon crawler, and restaurateur if she wants to reclaim the glory of her parents' formal restaurant. The gameplay here is definitely going for a light mix of different genres. The restaurant side kind of evokes styles of that of stuff like Racketeer or Moonlighter, where you'll gather recipes from various quests, find them in the world, and then people will come to your restaurant and you'll need to serve them. The different ingredients, of course, will come from dungeon crawling, with each area having different enemies for you to fight. Killing them and harvesting ingredients you'll take back to your restaurant to then cook. The general cook or restaurant side, it feels a little basic at the moment. Someone comes in, they're going to order something very specific, you serve them, they'll give you money and a tip. You can customize your restaurant with additional furniture, more tables and chairs so more people can eat at the same time. And this aspect is okay. I'm not quite sure from the demo if we're going to go like as involved in terms of how different themes and aesthetics will affect the restaurant like in Racketeer. The combat aspect plays more along the lines of that of a Hades or action roguelike. The gear that you can buy in town or upgrade will serve as your weapons that you'll go into the dungeons with. You'll be armed with both melee and range options, dodge, and your, again, job is to explore the dungeon, find ingredients and other things to then take back. So the progression of this one follows in line, I guess like in between Racketeer and Moonlighter. Go into the dungeon, collect goods and ingredients to go back to your restaurant, to then cook and serve the people to get the money, to then buy better stuff, to then go back into the dungeon, and so on. There is a reputation system that I believe is going to be like the progression gate of the game, as well as a day-night cycle. Now, unlike Racketeer, the day-night is kind of actually done in hours. It's not like in different phases where you start cooking and then you immediately go to the next phase, which I did like. So, all in all, Cusineer does show some potential. Again, with this kind of management combat sim style, I'm always curious to see whether or not they're going to stick the landing on all aspects, or if something will be kind of left on the cutting room floor. But if you're looking for an adorable cooking and cute roguelike, then this one may be worth checking out. And now for a new Metroidvania with Moonlight Pulse. We are animals that live on and inside a giant creature floating through space. In order to keep it alive, various creatures must kind of team up and fight parasites that are trying to infect and hurt the creature. We play as a group of those who are trying to figure out why and where these parasites are coming from, save the day, and of course learn some important lessons about friendship and teamwork along the way. So this game is definitely built on the model of teamwork makes the dream work. Each character that you get access to has different stats, different abilities, and also different ways of attacking and moving. Your kind of hedgehog friend, his whole thing is that he can do long jumps and runs, but he does this kind of like momentary like flip in the air before he starts running, so that limits where you can actually do his moves. There are hidden collectibles as well as items that you can equip to characters that can change their properties. This is important because there is an elemental system in this game, where enemies will take more or less damage based on the kind of damage that you're throwing at them. There's also a very interesting synergy between characters. Your kind of, I think his name is Lacuna, the kind of like water wolf kind of character, they can shoot a charge bubble that envelops an enemy in water, which you can then use Silex, I'm butchering their names, I apologize, Claw, if you have electricity on it, to do like triple damage. And there is definitely, again, a heavy emphasis on switching between the characters. If any character hits 0 health, it is game over, but they can kind of take like a bodyguard dive to protect their friend several times based on like how far you are along in the game. In one of the most like cutest and like most like wholesome aspects of this game, you'll gain Metroidvania powers much like in any other example of the genre, but instead of gaining it in the traditional way of killing enemies, fighting items in the world, you gain Metroidvania powers through the power of friendship, as the characters will talk to each other and motivate them to like grow and kind of improve their skills, which in turn becomes new Metroidvania powers. I am just waiting for the moment in this game where, you know, through the power of love and friendship, someone gains the courage to try double jumping for the first time. But despite the jokey atmosphere, this is a challenging Metroidvania. Enemies hit very hard, there are multiple routes always open to you. The different parasites that you're killing act as a progression gate in the game. As you kill them, this will open up shortcuts to previous areas or new ones, and the overall health of the creature that you're living on, that determines kind of where you can get access to and what story events will follow. And trust me, the game's story is going to go in some places that I don't think anyone is going to predict. I really enjoy this one, just a really great concept, solid Metroidvania design. The world is a little bit like, or I should say is quite open-ended, so it can be easy to kind of get lost or get sidetracked. But I enjoy Moonlight Pulse. As one final point, like in terms of the Metroidvania design, it does not appear to be as movement or tech focused as say an Ori or Hollow Knight, but it feels equal parts kind of action platformer and action combat. So if you are looking for another Metroidvania to check out, I highly recommend Moonlight Pulse. And now we turn to Cyber Knight's Flashpoint. This is a strategy RPG or an XCOM-like in a cyberpunk setting where we control teams of hackers and misfits trying to complete missions in the world. So this is definitely going for the more involved of the style of kind of in between the Firaxis XCOM and something along the lines of Phoenix Point. Each character has different amounts of energy that they can spend on various things per turn. switching weapons, using special moves, Overwatch, all that good stuff. On the mission that we play, there is a security measure or security rating that's in the upper right, that the more trouble you cause, the more will raise up, which will affect the danger and the amount of enemies coming at you, much like in a game style like Invisible Ink. Now, from my time in this one, the UI is a little tricky to read. Again, it's a lot of small symbols, a lot of things you have to kind of go over to figure out what something does, what you should be doing. I'm not quite sure where, I guess, like the extent of the persistent element, or if there is going to be like a grand campaign structure. But when we are looking for all manner of XCOM likes, it's certainly a small pool in the grand scheme of things. And Cyber Knight's Flashpoint looks like it is going to deliver for that squad-based goodness. So, if you have finally gotten tired of either XCOM or Phoenix Point, and looking for an indie take on that kind of design, then this is certainly one worth checking out. And for the last game of today's episode, this is Final Night. This is kind of being designed as the beat-em-up that has everything to it. There are multiple characters, special moves, unlocks, gear you can equip. You have technically one person you control and an AI-assisted teammate, but you can also equip two other characters that act as kind of like assist summons during combat. You can also swap between your main and secondary character at the cost that your main character will lose health while the secondary character has more power while you're controlling them. This is one of those games that it is clearly trying to differentiate itself by doing it all. And that kind of doing it all does, I think, come at the cost of readability. There is a lot going on in this game, from different button combos to things exploding on screen to everything that you're doing. And it's a little hard to kind of make sense as to what is happening. At one point, I was just button mashing and hoping for dear life that things were going to work. And definitely improving kind of like the readability of the foreground and the background. I think it's going to be a necessity here. But there is definitely something here for someone looking for a beat-em-up with a lot more, I guess, brains to it rather than just beating. So if you are looking for what looks like to be a very all-encompassing beat-em-up style game, definitely check out Final Night. And speaking of Final Night, we are still not done with our Next Fest coverage, as I had a chance to play even more demos, so we'll be showing that off in another video. Let me know if you want to see a best of Next Fest video here on Next Fest Wisdom. Be sure to do all the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. Check out our Discord and Patreon, as well as my books if you're interested in my thoughts on design. With that said, come back for yet another episode of my Next Fest coverage real soon, here on Game Wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games.